You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Steve Suarez, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Steve, welcome to The Only Constant, and thank you for being here. It's a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Lasse. It's really nice to be here. Looking forward to it.
Definitely. So there's this threat of disruption hanging over every company right now. But how do we manage this threat when the threat emanates from broad commoditized technology like generative AI? So everyone has it. Like Yaravadan said a couple of weeks ago in the podcast that generative AI is a new commoditized baseline, and you need to sort of innovate on top of that. So how do we even handle this threat if it's everywhere and everyone has this threat?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I every time everybody talks about AI, they really just I hear about the threats, and I think a lot of it is the mindset. And I'm a big believer in this book called The Growth Mindset. I think it's a fabulous book, and I think if we look at AI from both angles, both the threat and opportunity, we can use this kind of drive things forward. It reminds me of a story that I heard on. Two salesmen going into a new market. And the first salesman goes in and he says, "Look, we don't want to go into this market. There's zero opportunity here because no one is wearing shoes." And then the second salesman goes in, he goes, "This is an amazing opportunity. No one is wearing shoes. We have 100% market share if we go into the market." And so a lot of it is, how do you approach AI and how do you see it? And I think if you look at ways that you can use this, leverage it to increase your ability to have an impact, I think it's a wonderful technology. With every new technology, there's always ways that there's dangers involved. So I would take it back to when fire was first discovered. I'm sure back then there was somebody saying, "Oh, don't use fire because you'll get burned and it's a really bad technology." So it's about how you handle it and it's how you approach it, from my perspective, anyway.
But I think sometimes companies, the way I see them at least, and I know some will term themselves differently, but it's like only a couple of percent of what they do is about innovating on top of what they already have. Most of what they do is just running the business, running the operations, producing products, right? That they have customers. That's what they exist for, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they must feel, and I think that's the threat feeling, is that they need to do much more than just a couple of percent, right? They need to be, need to turn things around. How do you do that? And what if you make a wrong turn or you take the wrong step?
Well, you are going to take wrong turns. You are going to make mistakes. We all do. The important part is how do you react to it and how do you set yourself up to be able to use this technology and try things out. And so, I think there are a couple key things you need to do as an organization to really engage with this technology. First, you have to educate yourself and educate your staff. You need to know what this technology can really do. How do you separate kind of the hype from the reality and give your people the access so that they can see how do I apply this to my day-to-day job to make it more efficient and more effective, as well as looking at like how can this really disrupt our organization and what mitigating factors can we put in place today to minimize that disruption, or do we start looking at new ways and say, look, this is completely going to disrupt what we're doing. What is it that we're going to pivot to or work towards? You're right, a lot of organizations today focus on the here and now, and in as you know, in my organization, which is called Horizon X, we look at innovation in three different horizons. And the reason we're Horizon X is because we work in all three horizons. But Horizon One is incremental innovation. That's the innovation everybody knows really well. You take your process and how do I make it incrementally better?
Mm.
And I
The
say
atomic use cases, right?
exactly. And so I could say a lot of the organizations are really in this horizon one section. The people who really challenge themselves a bit more take new technologies, not new to the world, but new to their organization, and incorporate it into their systems, which is kind of the horizon two. And then the really bold ones take small bets, and do really big disruptive type stuff. A good organization will have all three of horizons in their approach. And that's where you really have to work to really drive innovation in your organization. And I'm a big believer that it's not this is not a luxury. This is not a luxury thing to do. All organizations have to do it, which is why I believe there's a big market in companies driving innovation, but getting results out of that innovation.
And why do you think people are? Because when I speak to companies, they are like, we believe our competitors are doing things, but when you just do a little search, you see that their competitors are doing absolute nothing or
Yeah.
close to nothing. And I bet those competitors are also sitting there saying, "Oh, what are our competitors doing?" Right? Everyone's going like this, right? So have the hype market around AI right now maybe stirred up too much, or what's your verdict on that?
I think so. I mean, if you look at what people are talking about, how they're using AI, first, I think their approach might be, we've got AI, what problems do we solve? Instead of really like solving a problem. In other words, identifying what is the problem and finding out what is the right way to solve that, instead of just going straight to the technology and say, we're going to use AI. So right
Mm,
now, it seems to me a lot of companies already know the answer to the problem, which is AI. So
mm,
I would say let's go back to basics, understand what problems are we trying to solve, and then identify how do we solve those problems. Those problems might not be technology. Maybe it's not really a problem. Maybe the right way to solve it is to eliminate it completely and not even do that activity.
yeah.
And so I think a lot of people get caught up in, I have to do an AI project or I have to apply AI to everything. I saw a commercial about AI applied to a toothbrush. And so every company is trying to benefit off of the AI multiplier. If you can include AI into your project proposal or AI into anything, there, I guess the likelihood will move up. And so I think we're going to get a little bit of that until people start realizing and coming down, and then we go back to basics about solving problems, and then focused on the problem, not on the solution.
But you said, we've got some problems, and the answer is always AI, right?
Mm.
And and also the thing, we have AI, right? But the point is also for me sometimes, do we, right? What is AI, and do we have AI, or do we have LLMs? Do we have image recognition? I think people are, this box of AI seems to be so big and so all encompassing, like their term to end them all, right? The ring to find them all and bind them in the darkness, to use a Lord of the Rings
Yeah.
preference, right? But I think that's also the confusing part, isn't it? The board of directors saying we want AI, and someone has to translate that into real improvements.
Yeah, I think, and this is why it's really important. And if there's anything today you get out of this podcast that I'm suggesting is education. You have to educate yourself. You have to be speaking from a point of knowledge. A lot of people hear what other people say, get other opinions, and then they regurgitate those opinions.
Mm,
To really get control over this, to get a sense of like, I know what's going on, it's important to educate yourself on all the terminology, educate yourself on the technology, its capabilities, and also its limitations, and understand the risks involved in implementing this, and making sure that you're not introducing new, bigger risks to your organization by trying to get involved in this. And I think all of that is key, but you're not going to be able to do that unless you're talking from a position of understanding. And the good thing about right now, there's so much good material that's available for free around these
Mm.
technologies. That I think that education piece is key. That will drive everything else.
Mm. I think the regurgitation. I've sensed a lot of that as well, right? Everyone has when you're online. I do a presentation where we talk about some of the pitfalls of the technology as well, just the LLMs basically and generative AI, and people come up and say they never heard about these pitfalls, right? So they've been to tons of AI presentations, but
Yeah,
they've always just had this story of where we're going to be when we land on Mars. Well, to use an analogy, right? There's
yeah.
this futuristic $7 trillion or $15 trillion, this overbidding, and it just seems to go. Um, I used to say it's frictionless. It just goes, through the roof. Why is that? Is people afraid of, influencers afraid of missing out, or?
I think so. I think a lot of people are talking about it. They want to get engaged. You went from a whole bunch of people, some people doing AI, to just loads of people now calling themselves AI experts and stuff like that. And the reality is that we need to sit down and look at these technologies. Your example about somebody didn't know about the pitfalls. If anybody that follows me knows I publish a lot on LinkedIn, and I had put an article out about some of the risks involved in AI. And I
Mm,
just maybe to point it out for your audience, one of the examples is you would think that if somebody built an AI to play chess, that wouldn't be risky, right? What could go wrong if you built an AI to play chess with another human being? But they did this and they didn't put the safeties in, and they had a robotic arm moving around the chess pieces. And a 7-year-old kid was playing chess. They decided to touch the opponent's chess piece. At the same time, the robotic arm came down and broke the little kid's finger, right?
mm, mm,
And
yeah,
so here, an innocent AI playing chess all of a sudden breaks a human's finger. Um, Another example is I think it was a company out of the US that sold one of their trucks that was about $77,000 for a dollar because it allowed it to negotiate with a chatbot, and the
yeah.
chatbot was enticed to say, "Hey, this is a really good deal. Do we have a binding deal?" And chatbot goes, "Yes, we have a deal," and they have to honor their commitment. So you bought a truck for a buck.
Yeah, the Chevy Tahoe, the Chevrolet of Watsonville, right? Right,
Yeah,
that
exactly,
case, yeah.
exactly. And then the other side, it was obviously the Canada example, where Air Canada was giving refunds that didn't really match with their policy. In that example, it's kind of funny because maybe the AI was more human than we were because it was during a bereavement, and the AI made a decision to give back the refund outside of the policy, and maybe that
Mm.
showed us maybe the policy was wrong. So AIs don't always go wrong when it goes. Maybe it gives us a reflection that we should revisit some of our policies and some of our decisions as
Yeah.
well.
Some people say that AI is better than we are, right? More humane than humans are sometimes.
Yeah.
That's also a fun reflection. Um, but but uh, but there's just this noise, right? Where um, we want to overdo things. We want to believe this is the sci-fi world. So someone said to me that half of people can make this not work for you if you use AI, and you can actually make it bad, right? If you want it to be bad,
Mhm.
and the other half, if they want it to be good, can make it good, right? And there's this technologist thing, right, where we've all been sort of sci-fi dreaming when we were kids and saw Star Wars, Star Trek, whatever you saw, and now we sort of seem like we have something here, right? Is that what's also going on? Is it a fascination or a wish to overdo it, wish to live in the future?
Well, maybe, but you know what? I don't see that as a negative thing. I think that's good because what happens is it's the ingenuity and the ability of what's possible is what drives innovation. So if people can dream it and think about it and figure new creative ways of getting there, I think that that's what really pushes innovation. So I don't want to shut down people's imaginations or opportunities. There are some crazy stuff out there, but sometimes it's the crazy people that make things happen. So I think there should be a balanced approach on trying things out, experimenting, keeping things as cheap and frictionless as possible. And then, if you find something that you're developing that comes out to be very valuable, that's where you should look to see how do I make something out of this and implement this further. So, and then there's a whole bunch of people that'll probably waste their times on things that just doesn't add value, will not get implemented. It's not
Mm.
feasible. But then they learn, right? And it's part of the learning process.
Yeah, and you already sort of answered this a little bit earlier, right? But I like to talk about you. Do you remember the I don't know who it was, as a sea level. It's just a good old quote, that maybe God built the world in 7 days, but He didn't have an installed base, right? And that's the same. The question you already answered a little bit earlier. Is this AI boom? Is that innovation on installed base, or should companies look to entirely new business models, application landscapes, value propositions, entirely new people? Is this greenfield or brownfield?
Yeah. You know what? I'm gonna play it safe, and I'm going to tell you it's a hybrid. I think it's both. We were talking a little bit about kind of how do you approach it between the incremental innovation
Your
and the
horizons,
new
yeah.
world innovation. So I think most people will probably start in that horizon one because that's the easiest thing is finding out um, how do you build new markets? How do you build new processes within your current technology or your current business to make you more efficient and effective? The good news is that this technology can help do that. I've seen it personally. Every day, I use generative AI to help me either through posts, through idea generation. This technology can be very powerful. But the important part is you got to test, you got to use it, you got to try things out. And the better you get, then that's when you can look at how do I apply this to new business models? How do I look at new markets and approach this? And then when you feel like you've got a good grasp, you really understand the capabilities and limitations, is you could look at new ways to be completely disruptive in this technology. So I don't think that it's mutually exclusive that you can only do the install base versus going out and looking for new opportunities. I think you need to be doing both. There's a good book called Corporate Explorer where they teach people, well, they tell people that you need to be ambidextrous. You need to both do the near term, but also have the far term in mind when you apply. And I think the best organizations will do that. Any focus on any one of those sides, if you're too focused on today or if you're too focused on tomorrow, will hurt you in the long run.
Yeah, but I have a lot of things I want to ask you here, right?
Yeah.
I like this. I like Richard Rommel's quote from Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, which is a book I really liked. There were already three books mentioned here. We are not even 20 minutes in. That's good. But where he says that in if the outlook is unclear, you need to have a proximate strategic objective, right? And you shouldn't look far ahead.
Yeah.
And isn't the outlook unclear right now?
Yeah, it is. Well, I think it can be. I think there are trends, and I think we have data, and we need to be better. We need to use our data a lot better than what we do.
We've said that for 10 years, haven't we? 15 years. So
Yeah, but we haven't solved it, right? So I
no.
think that there is opportunity, and there's still problems with data, and I don't think there's a single organization out there. And I think if your readers, if anybody have solved this problem, please message us, message me directly, link in with me, and tell me, how you solved it, because I definitely want to hear about it. But it's a problem that still hasn't fully been solved, and I don't know that will ever be solved. Seeing that the amount of data is just increasing. I think there was a really cool stat saying that the data in the last 3 years is more than the data in human history before
Mm.
that, right?
Yeah, but one of my friends also said once, that there's no company in the world that doesn't have a master data problem.
Yeah.
They don't exist, and, and to some extent, if they don't have it, maybe they're not evolving at all, right? So
Yeah.
it is, but so my key question is also, Steve, is it wrong to have a horizon one view? Right? You said most companies will probably do, but is that wrong?
No.
Some people will say it is, right? That's the thing, right? That's the
Yeah.
hype market we just
Yeah.
discussed. Some influencers will say that's wrong. That's too small.
Mm. No. Well, I think you're right. I think some people will say that. And some people say, oh, look, we only care about Horizon 3. We want to be disruptive innovators. And I've actually had teams or even managers that have told me, Steve, we only want to focus on Horizon 3. Horizon 3 are things that are going to take years to develop. It's very expensive. It takes time. And I don't know about you, Lassie, but is your management going to wait 5 to 10 years to see you produce value, if you will? No, you have to have a balance between today and tomorrow. And so,
Mm,
what I tell my clients is having a good balance depending on your needs, depending on where you're going, between horizon 1, 2, and 3. The bulk of it, and I haven't really seen it change a lot, but the bulk of it will be horizon 1. So the
mm,
bulk of what you're doing will be, because that's your operations, that's today, that's how you're working. I would say a good 20% of that is horizon 2 type work or horizon 2 type projects, and then like the last percentage, like a 10%, depending on how bold you want to be, are your long-term moonshot bets, and that's about 10% of your portfolio that you want to focus on innovations. But it's not only kind of these percentages, you also have to be able to pick the right projects or
mm.
the right programs that you want to kick off, to try it out. And all of that is very difficult. It's not easy. If it were easy, then every company would be succeeding. So part of it is, knowing what that balance is, making sure that you have that both near term and long term vision, and making the right bets. And the companies that are making the right bets are the ones that are getting ahead.
So the worst thing a company can do would be to have all these atomic use cases in Horizon One, and then not bringing them to the fore, right? Or
Yeah.
not actually, spreading the word, or just let them live in a corner somewhere in, I don't know, in HR or something.
Well, the companies that are like that are the Blockbusters of the world, the Nokias, the Blackberries,
Mm,
Kodak. Those are the people that were worried only about Horizon One type activity.
yeah.
Um,
And then, but also, the idea is that I'm just trying to see what should companies do right now. So they should look at this, getting to work with it in small use cases, but then also make sure that they zoom in on it and sort of extrapolate the ideas to something more. Right? That's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, they listen. They need to get in. They need to dive in, understand the technology, try it out in a very safe environment where they can try out their experiments, and start getting muscle memory for their companies, so that they can start understanding. Hey, we developed this. We can use this to drive these ideas. And the best bet is you're going to get it from the people that are in the front line. These are the people dealing with this day to day. They're going to see the opportunities.
Mm.
So, getting the technology in their hands to say, what would you do with this? Or how could we change things up? I think is key. You talked about having the board decide and all this other stuff. And I sit on boards. So, I'm not saying that, having the board involved it is critical, but where you're really going to have an impact on this technology is putting it in the hands of the frontline
Mm.
people who are going to use the technology to really have an impact on the organization. The people on the board won't be close enough to understand
No.
where the best applications of this is. They're going to hear it from other people, they're going to see use cases, they're going to do a lot of reading on it, but the people that are actually hands on it are if you can get it there, in my opinion, that's the best place you're going to have your impact.
So that also means, if I okay, that would also mean that you should the board of directors should say, okay, they want AI, they can say that something AI, blah blah, but they should actually be prepared to look at and get an introduction and get impressed by something that maybe improves an AP process 5% with AI, right? So because that I think that's also sometimes the problem, right? You can't come with these small, minuscule atomic use cases and say now we did AI. That's not enough for a lot of companies, but that is actually what should be enough for the short term, right?
That's right. I mean, I think it is. I think it's part of getting a little bit more maturity and understanding it a little bit better.
Mm.
And I think once they understand it, then they can grow, be mature, be more bold. Right now, I think we're in the infancy stage where people don't really understand fully on what is possible and what's not possible, and they're believing kind of what they're hearing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. So people should look at not necessarily right now, but in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe they're gonna have something that could disrupt them. They should not expect it to be tomorrow, and they should not expect their competitors either to do it tomorrow.
Yeah. And we've been talking about AI this whole time, but don't just stick on AI. There are other technologies, other things that you can find value. Um, and I think going back to my earlier thing, the answer to every question isn't just AI.
No, it's problems, right? That's what you said
That's
initially
it.
as well.
Right.
Yes.
That's why
So,
in
and
the
I actually, AI isn't everything that's stirring right now, right? You're also a select speaker on quantum computing and cryptography in that related field as well, right? Because that's where it's people are very focused on it as well. So, first of all, in that sense, I've read a lot about quantum mechanics. I actually did, and I understood it, and I'm not on a what do you call formula level, right? But I'm not doing the math and everything, but I understand the concepts. I think I understand quite well as well. But I really don't understand quantum computing.
Mhm.
I don't understand how it works when it's in a superposition and you break it down, and then but because then you don't know what it was in the superposition, because if you know, you don't, it's not in the superposition. But anyway, can you explain quantum computing a little bit to me and the audience? I think a lot of people will love to know, what is this, how does it work?
Lastly, don't be concerned if you don't understand it. There's, I would say, most, almost probably everybody doesn't fully understand it, and I think it's an interesting technology. Even Einstein, he called it spooky action at a distance.
Yes.
Um, so I think if you understand kind of the basics and understand that, and then the applications, it's a very interesting technology. And I put this technology both, there's some in Horizon One, which is communication and quantum sensing and technologies that are being used today. There's some in the kind of the Horizon Two area, and then there's the computing that's really in the Horizon Three, and where we have impact. So uh, let's just talk about quantum computing for right now. So quantum computing, the way classical computers work is they work and they encode information in zeros or ones, right?
Mm.
So think about something being charged or not charged, on or off, and so it's in a binary state. It's either on or off. The power of quantum is that quantum can be in both zero and one, or anything in between, in that state. So if I think a lot of people like to use the, like, you're spinning a coin, and is it heads or tails? And if you think about quantum, it's both heads and tails because it's still spinning, and it could be any percentage of zero, one. It could be any point percentage in between there. And what that does when you're computing, it gives you the ability to try everything at once. The way a classical computer works, it's very serial. It tries one thing, and then it comes back, tries another thing. Quantum can try all paths at once simultaneously, which means that it is exponentially faster than a classical computer. One maybe one use case to hopefully bring it to life is that if you think about encryption, today kind of the most popular encryption is to 2048 bit encryption. And for a classical computer to solve that problem or to crack that encryption, it would take a minimum of 10.7 million years to solve that problem.
Mm.
Quantum computing could do that in about 8 hours.
Mm.
And so if you think about kind of comparing that, now quantum computing won't be used for everything and it's not really meant for everything. Right now, the current view is that it will help in optimization problems. It'll help in simulation problems. It'll help in machine learning, which why that's why a lot of people are talking kind of AI that's kind of machine learning. They're calling it QML, quantum
Hmm.
machine learning, and then in security. And so you mentioned about if it gets looked at, it changes its property. And so anything that gets eavesdropped in communications, and you see that its property changed, you automatically know that it's been eavesdropped on. So it can be applied in that as well. Um, and these are just kind of high levels.
Yeah.
You're right.
Nice.
Quantum is very, very technical, but
Yeah. So if you thought the AI was weird, this is even weirder, right?
without a doubt, without a doubt, it's actually exciting. So weird that it's exciting,
Yeah,
and
that's
so
also my problem, right? It's just this, so we know it because it obviously works, right? But when we get a result from it, I'm always like, how do we ask it, and how do we not break the superposition? There's just some things there that my mind just doesn't get.
yeah. But I mean, but the question is, do you really need to know how it
Yeah.
happens? So when you use your iPhone, and your iPhone has so much different, you don't really need to know how it's built and how the
No, no, no.
transistors.
But we know that there's this whole, this nested, binary, zeros and ones. We can sort of see, okay, it started there and then it's just exploded onto a massive scale, right?
Yeah.
But my problem is I can't. I have trouble. But we don't have to dive deeper into that. But I just have trouble seeing the QC thing in the in even though I even though I understand that quantum mechanics is absurdly irrational for a human being, and on the base level of it, I accept that and I
Yeah.
understand that. I still, if I assume the lessons from quantum mechanics, I still don't understand how they do a quantum computer. And that's where it gets really
Well,
confusing for me because I see, okay, so the superposition can be everything. Okay, good. But it's immediately you ask it for something, it will become something. And then it never was in a superposition, or was it? And you're saying that in the superposition, it tries out everything before it answers, which is, yeah.
let me. I tell you what. Let me. Maybe this will make it easier for you. If you think about nature and everything that happens around your environment and everything that happens in the world, it's quantum mechanical.
Yeah.
And so understanding how the sun converts energy, photosynthesis and converts energy, um, I mean, this is how everything around you operates. So, the at the simplest form, I'd like to say that we're using nature's operating system to help us compute, because nature can do it very easily, and at very low temperature, at very low energy levels.
Mm.
And so today we use about 2% of the world's energy to create fertilizer, and yet the in nature it doesn't use that much energy and all of that. So I think, listen, there's a lot of opportunities in this, and we're just at the beginning stages. And we're understanding more and more about quantum mechanics, and quantum properties, and understanding how to move data into these properties and taking data
Yeah.
out. But the thing is, we have some amazing smart people attacking this problem that could have amazing implications to the world on how do we solve climate change, how do we come up with better batteries
Mm.
there's a lot of different great drug discoveries and speeding that up. I think there's a lot of really great opportunities in front of us. And I'm not a physicist. I don't pretend to be one. I'm a guy on the business side, so I look for business opportunities and help commercialize this. But I'm just in awe of the amazing talent that and the very smart people that are involved in this industry. And part of me kind of hopes some of that smartness rubs off on me as I work with these people.
So maybe I should just, assume that I will never really understand it and say, whatever, I'll just start using it in a business context. And then, I'll pivot to be a quantum computing expert now.
Yeah.
No, but the thing is, how many qubits do we have now or connected? What?
Well, there's logical qubits, there's physical qubits, there's qubits that have high quality, qubits that don't have high quality. So there's companies that will say multi thousands that they have,
Mm.
other companies that will say four quality qubits or 10 quality qubits. Maybe they might even be better than the ones that have thousands. So the reality is there's multiple modalities. So a lot of people are trying to approach this problem on how do you get a computer into a quantum state differently.
Mm.
Everything from diamond, some people are using diamonds, other people are using, super cooling.
Yeah, you
Some
need the
people,
superconductor, right?
yeah, the superconducting. Some people are using trapped ions. And some people are doing neutral atoms. So there's different companies approaching this problem from different angles, which is fantastic because they're all trying to do the same thing: is get a computer into a quantum state, being able to process data, have high coherence times so that they can process it. And so until there's a clear winner, I think there's a lot of companies trying to solve that problem. So I wouldn't be able to compare apples to apples if I told you what the different qubits everybody has, because you can't really
No, no,
do it
but
with
my question is also out of, pure personal curiosity because I read somewhere, I can't remember if it was a superstring or a multiverse theorist who said that if we ever have more than, was it 30 qubits, it must be the pure qubits, right? The
yeah,
superconductor
yeah,
qubits connected at one time, we would have proven multiverses, right? That because multi universe, because it would then use superpositions of more superpositions to calculate than there are particles in the known universe.
yeah. Yeah, I've heard that same stat, but I think it was, from what I heard, was 500 qubits.
Oh,
Uh,
okay, I heard
and
from only 30, but maybe okay, okay.
yeah, yeah. But even that, this is what makes this such an amazing technology, that as this, it'll just radically change. I'm hoping anyway. Listen, I'm an innovator, so I'm always looking for the best thing and opportunities. But I do have people in the academic world that keep me calm and like
Mm,
say, "Hey, Steve, don't add to the hype cycle." And so I want to be a trusted partner in this industry, and I don't want to be adding to the hype, but I also want to keep people interested and
yeah,
excited. And so that's why I personally am involved in this, because I'm constantly learning every day. And if you talk about the Horizon One and Horizon Two and Three, this is kind of one of my bets in the Horizon 3. Yes, I do talk about this. I don't just talk about this, but it seems like lately everybody wants to talk to me about quantum. And I'll just put it here. I'm not a quantum expert, even though I've been designated by so many people being. I just happen to be um, quantum literate, I guess.
yeah.
But I'm learning just like most people are in your audience. So.
Awesome. But okay, we were taken surprised by generative AI when it came out in November 2022, the ChatGPT 3. But the impact from scaled quantum computing might be even bigger, right? Well, let me put this another way. So with ChatGPT, we saw we could go and use the technology, and that actually made this incredible attention and boom in people's minds. Suddenly, everyone saw AI as AI or something. Everyone, grandmothers, everyone talked AI and saw AI, right? When we see quantum computing in that moment, when we have a quantum computing moment, when we have that, will that be because it broke into the United States bank, or or encrypted? No, decrypted all the bitcoins in the whole world? Is that going to be the QC moment?
It's funny. There is this thing called Q Day, which is the day they predict that the 24-bit, 248-bit encryption will be cracked, and that's an algorithm that was written by somebody that I studied under when I studied quantum at computing at MIT in executive education. His name's Peter Shor, and so Peter Shor wrote an algorithm that breaks large factor numbers down, and that's what actually protects an encryption. And there are predictions on when that day will come.
Mm.
And so the important part is once a quantum computer is strong enough, that will happen. And there's a lot of organizations, governments, regulators looking to put policies in place to come up with, and then you're going to hear this. It's called PQC, so post quantum cryptography, and how do you protect yourself against quantum computing? And you already see Apple Computer has already taken the first stab at this. They came up with a new protocol called PQ3, and you can see it. I put something on my LinkedIn, but there's a lot of writing on their blogs about this, and they're taking it serious. And other organizations are going to be taking it serious. I know the U.S. government wrote an executive order specifically
Mm.
on post quantum cryptography, and so I believe that there is going to be that moment that your cryptography will be at danger, and we're all going to have to work on more stronger cryptographic keys to protect our data. And
And that's where we get into sort of a cold war with this, isn't it?
it could be, it could, yes, I think you will find nation states and
Yeah, but just in general, businesses ramping up even more, and hackers ramping up even more, and everything just keeps, increasing. Right? So much effort is being spent on this, right?
yeah, no, without a doubt. And I think part of some of the bets like I'm talking about is this bet of stronger cybersecurity, stronger encryption,
Mm.
protecting your data. And that's very important to every organization. And so that's another angle, which is why I'm very interested in this, is how do I help people protect their data and protect their information so that they don't get compromised. And this is not like a luxury. Can I do this? This is an imperative. I have to do this.
Yeah, yeah, but it's just not. It's just the moment with ChatGPT seemed like a productive moment, right? But this seems like we might have a quantum computing, what we call it, nuclear bomb moment instead, right? Destruction, right?
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm a positive kind of person, so I'm hoping that it'll be for good, quantum for good. The reason I think it'll be quantum for good, and which is different from AI. AI is available at all of our fingertips today. We all can use the technology. We all have access to the
Mm,
technology. Quantum is a different animal. So quantum, you'll need access to the quantum machines, and those quantum machines are not going to be available and just for everybody to use. The skill sets to actually use quantum computing is going to be different. It's a different paradigm of encoding, coding, stuff like that. And even today, there's a stat out there that said for every three open positions in quantum, there's only one qualified candidate.
mm.
And so there is a lack of people that can really use this technology and be able to kind of exploit it. And so I think the limit of the amount of computers or computers on the first people that are going to be able to crack this and who has access to those computers and the people that have the skill sets. I think that'll determine how it's going to be used, where it's going to be used. And typically nefarious actors won't be the first ones to have the access to
Mm.
this, and I'm hoping that it'll be the quantum for good people that will. But that's why what I do for a living is help organizations not wait until the technology is ready. This takes time. It's complicated, as you mentioned earlier. I help organizations get it involved, understand the technology, and how to get themselves prepared for this future that will be coming.
So you don't see, and this is obviously a prediction that might turn out sour, but you don't see quantum computers going small and getting into all our devices at some point. And ordinary computers were quite big some
Yeah.
years
Oh,
back.
yeah. No, well, I think it can be, but not because it's a quantum computer that's getting small. It's the access of quantum computing. And so it'll be having access to a cloud quantum computer
Mm,
from your phone, right?
mm.
Or that. I mean, I think, depending, but I don't know that we'll ever have quantum computing phones, if you will. Um, but, who knows, maybe 20 years from now,
No,
some.
I also see it weird, right? But things have been developing at breathtaking pace the last 60 years, at least in computing, right? Something
Exactly.
like that. Oh, but this also touched upon. I've always said that automation, which is what drives a lot of the agendas for what we want to do and how businesses work positively with technology, is to automate things and make things smarter, right? That's the whole raison d'être of IT, right? To automate things,
Yeah.
right? But there's an equally large trend in cybersecurity as well, because as we just said, hackers are getting better, and we need to protect ourselves and prepare for future threats as well. But how do these two work together, and how do they work against each other, automating and being secure?
Well, listen, I think a lot of people focus on automation and how do we make things cheaper. Um, when I looked at this and I was driving transformation at a large bank, my first thing wasn't how can I automate this. It was how can I eliminate this. And sometimes people automate processes that are completely useless or that don't add any value. So even before we get into your automation question, Lassie, I just want people to challenge
Mm,
themselves to say, before you automate a process, really challenge, do you really need that process?
mm,
And so if you say you do need that process, then yes, start talking about how you can automate that process and see kind of why you're automating processes in the first place. Have they been poorly designed or poorly developed? As far as kind of cybersecurity, I think automation in cybersecurity is a lot of the nefarious actors are using AI. They're using automation. I read an article just this morning about how AI is being used to help uh, bad actors, really intrude and get into some of the cyber, having the cyber problems that we have today. So we definitely have to look at that, and so it I think the automation piece is key. We have to continue to bring down costs and increase our service for our customers. But we have to be careful what we're automating because we could be automating something that making our problems even worse at a faster rate.
yeah,
um,
yeah, and
I
there's
don't know if
also.
that answers your question, but
No, but it's a difficult question. It's also a very open question, right? But being more concrete, maybe saying that back in the noughties, we saw a very open internet. For instance, technology was new, everything was fresh, and everything was just open, and we trusted all the big tech. But now we're still seeing that, but we're also seeing, especially with regulation from EU and other large entities, we're seeing a challenge to that as well, right? So, do you think the future will be more open, like the internet in the noughties, or will it be less open because of the big threats we're having?
yeah, yeah, I think it's a good question. I mean, it's one of those that I don't know that I have the right answer to. I think there'll be a bit of both. I think there will be new things that come out that will be open, and then we'll realize we probably opened it too much, and we'll try to put in some guardrails in place. and other things that will probably close off, that we probably should be more open and having it more free. And I think we're constantly going to have to deal with that and look at that. But I'd love your. I know this is you interviewing me, but I'd love to hear from you. What do you think?
Well, I think that I'm actually very concerned about the whole fake, the
Deep fakes?
the generative AI fake, what do you call it? Marsh, right? What do you call
Yeah, yeah,
or
the deep fakes,
yeah, yeah, but
stuff like that.
also you can just make anything fake online, right? You can make fake profiles and everything. And I think the whole social media was built on a trust that we had an agent, a person who wanted to send a message to the world. But now we don't even know if there is a person behind it sending a message, right? And I just have this weird feeling that we might, and I hope actually this is where it's going to go, that we might turn back to what it means when the media is mediated by someone, that
Yeah,
that someone is mediating the message and saying this is true, this is not true. Because I think that's every time we've had these big dispersals of communication, possibilities for people to say anything to anyone, also just having these direct speaking to a constituency from politicians. We've had turns towards autocracy or despotism at some point. We've had um, unraveling of social fabrics. I see it as a little bit less open. I see also, with the way they've been trolling New York Times with articles and everything. I think we're going to see a lot of the internet closing a little bit more down on itself. I see also from a geopolitical point of view. Um, so this large mesh of this large human web that we've had for at least 20-25 years or so with the internet is going to be more fragmented, I think.
yeah.
But hopefully also more mediated. That's what I hope. If it just keeps on going open and unmediated, I think it will be a bad world.
Yeah, the problem is you talk about trusted sources, and the problem is trusted to who, right? So somebody that might be trusted to me might not be trusted to you.
Oh yeah, but
You,
then right? Like when you choose a newspaper, you sort of know their agenda, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
If you read the Guardian, they'll tell you what they think, right?
yeah.
And
No, without a doubt, without a
but
doubt.
you don't really know necessarily when you go online like that, necessarily, right? And you can get
Yeah,
all kind of
yeah, yeah,
messages and
yeah.
fakes
And
as well.
I think that's why my earlier point on education, the more you can educate yourself and understand things, I think the better off. I think a lot of people hear from other people, get into echo chambers, and then just repeat what they hear from other people instead of understanding it for themselves.
Yeah, and a lot of the actors also, those that are actually are people, they're also just acting because now they have a brand where they have to be someone, right? The room for doubt. I think the discussion, like the discussions we're having right now, Steve, we don't have a lot of those. We have a lot of, single line statements all the time. People saying the same things all the time because they think if they say I have doubts sometimes, or people will be like, oh, then we can listen to you. We don't trust you. But for me, someone saying I have doubt is actually a testament to their quality and uh, to their intelligence, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I
And
grew up in a religious family, and there was also always Protestants, Søren Kierkegaard way. There's this uh, doubt is what actually gives you faith, right?
mm,
If you
mm.
don't have doubt, you're just a fanatic. You don't have faith, right? Because faith is connected to doubt all the time.
That's a very good point. I like that. I like the that saying.
Yeah, that's so, and also, and so Kierkegaard also says, and this might be relevant actually, that if you're a true believer, you're always a little bit lonely because you can never uh, throw your beliefs directly onto other people. So
Mm,
I think
mm.
that could also be a message to a hype market. Anyway, accept the loneliness and the
Yeah,
doubt.
exactly. The loneliness. We're supposed to inspire here, people.
No, no, that's the point, right?
No,
Sometimes,
no, no, no.
sometimes doubt is also an inspiration because
It
it means
is.
that
It
people will
is.
reflect a
I,
little
I
bit,
like
right?
it. I like what you said. I think it's a good point.
So, but that also means one of the things I've been doubting a lot over the last couple of months is do we really need a an AI strategy, right? I've also been asking these questions on a lot of my podcast episodes through a lot of other guests. So, but because it all boils down to data, doesn't it? Do we
Yeah,
need an AI? Do we need a quantum computing, a cybersecurity strategy, or do we just need a data strategy?
yeah. Yeah, I think you and I were talking about the data earlier and the importance of data. I think you do need a data strategy is what underpins everything for me. Is you have to have data that is clean, that is usable. It was funny where I used to work. A lot we would hire these PhD students or PhDs coming out of university to manage our data, very smart data scientists, and we would pay them and spend half of their time focus on cleaning data and wrangling data, and then the other half is kind of spending on getting the insight. So
Mm,
I think coming up with a very good data strategy and how the data can be used will have an impact on how it gets used in AI, will have an impact on how it gets used in quantum, in cyber, all of it. And so I think you should have a data strategy, but you should have a strategy on how you're going to be using AI, how you're not going to be using AI, the guardrails. Even quantum computing, in quantum, it even gets a little bit more trickier because you need to take data and then you need to encode that data and take it from classical binary data into a quantum state, be able to do
mm,
the calculations, and then decode that data
mm,
back into a classical state so your classical computers can use it. And you need to ensure that in that entire process that it's error free so that the quality of the data you're getting out is usable and impactful. So there's a lot of different parts that you'll need to do to get that. You're never going to just use quantum computing alone to be able to get your data out. It's a hybrid between both quantum and classical. I would say
mm,
you're probably going to be using more classical than quantum. Um,
mm. But
so
having, what if we had a lot of crappy, redundant data, right? Would
yeah,
there ever be
exactly.
would we need cybersecurity
Yeah.
to protect
Well,
us?
that's the important part is you got to clean. You got to. That's why having a good data strategy, data quality is key. You have to have a good area where you have trusted sources and understanding. What data and who can use the different data. I'm not a If I could go back in time, I probably would have spent more of my career in the data space, seeing
Mm.
how critical and important it is. But I think having someone that understands that it can truly make things happen in this area will be a key component to the success on how do you use these other technologies. They go hand in hand.
So talking about, data is more of a fundamental thing, right? But you also said, having AI and maybe QC strategies, and I asked Scott Newton on the podcast some shows back if technology could ever be a strategy if you're not a software company, and he said no.
Yeah, technology is not a strategy. It's
No.
it's a how.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. That's why you just said you need an AI strategy, maybe. So I just want to ask you that.
Well, I mean, I think when I talk about an AI strategy, is a response. So part of it is you need a strategy on how you're going to use this technology, what you're going to use. This will never take over for your business strategy.
Mm,
AI strategy, your quantum strategy, all feeds into your overall business strategy. You're not going to have just a strategy say, hey, we're running this off of our AI strategy. And so maybe the word strategy is it's
more
your
of a policy
plan
on approach,
and
maybe. Yeah.
policy and approach. Strategy kind of gives it the importance that to say, look, this is well thought out. This is how we're going to implement. This is what we're going to do with it. This is what we're not going to do with it. This is who can use it. This is who can't use it. And to me, that's kind of the strategy. This strategy is an internal strategy. It's not an outwardly facing strategy.
Mm.
And so your business strategy always trumps every other strategy.
That's
Uh,
a good nuance to it. That's great. Love that answer. And Steve, this has been a really, really tremendously great conversation. I'm really happy with it, and really happy you joined me as well. I have one final question for you, which is sort of the centerpiece of the podcast. So, I'm if you're ready for it.
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
So, Steve, what is the only constant?
Change isn't just happening, it's accelerating. Adapting isn't just important, it's imperative. And so, what I'm trying to say is the amount of change happening right now, it just keeps getting faster and faster. And instead of getting overwhelmed by it, it's important to get in there, educate yourself, understand, be part of the change. Don't let the change happen to you. And so being able to adapt is important. And I know personally, being involved in innovation, it can feel overwhelming, but it's very empowering if you go out there, learn what's going on, read articles, keep yourself current on what things are and what they're not. And don't just rely on what you're hearing from other people, validate it for yourself, get the information yourself. And I could tell you that, like, me getting involved with quantum computing, I would say about 5 years ago, my son came up to me and said, "Dad, why are people listening to you on quantum computing? You're not a physicist or anything like that." I think people are listening because I'm doing some of the work, the research, understanding. And so that's why people ask me all the time to come to their conferences or come to their podcasts and talk about this technology because I'm practicing what I'm preaching. I'm learning about it. And it is true. The pace of change is so quick, and it continues to be quick. And I want to be on top of it. And so education is something that I would recommend to all of you.
So, accelerating change and adapting to it, being curious.
Curiosity is key, and continue to want to learn. The minute you stop learning, I think that's the hard part for me. I'm always curious. I always want to learn, and there's plenty of stuff. The funny thing is that the more I learn, the more I see that I don't know anything.
So, actually, I saw two constants there: curiosity and accelerating change.
Yeah. Well,
So,
sorry. Yeah, yeah. You asked for one, and I gave you two. I'm an overachiever. I'm sorry.
love it, Steve. Thank you so much for that answer. It's a great answer. And thank you for being on The Only Constant. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You've listened to The Only Constant, a podcast sponsored by Basico.